I still remember that moment very clearly. My husband stood at the door, holding his suitcase, and said casually, "The doctors are already with Liam. You don't need me there." At that time, my 11-month-old son had a fever over 40 degrees Celsius. His body was burning. He was lying in the pediatric emergency room, and my husband got on a plane to go skiing with his friends. I carried my baby into the hospital alone. I signed the admission papers while trying to keep my hands from shaking. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't make a scene. I just looked at my son's red, feverish face and made a promise to myself. I will never forget this feeling. The feeling of being left alone by the one person who should have been right beside me. If you have ever gone through a moment where your fear was treated like it didn't matter, type 1 below. Sometimes just seeing a number is enough to know you are not alone. I didn't call him again after that phone call. I didn't send any messages to blame him either. I just sat down on a hard plastic chair in the emergency room, holding my baby close to my chest, and let everything slow down. My mind was no longer panicking. Instead, there was a strange kind of clarity. This wasn't the first time he chose his work, his friends, or his comfort over me and our child. It's just that this time, the situation was too clear for me to make excuses for him anymore. I started asking myself, if I accept this today, what will it look like in 5 years, in 10 years? A child growing up with a father who is always too busy and a mother who always handles everything alone. I didn't know what I would do yet. I wasn't even thinking about divorce. But in that moment, staring at my silent phone, I understood one thing. There are truths you have seen for a long time, but only today they hurt enough that you can no longer pretend they're not real. Our problem did not start with one big shock. It started with very small things. So small that if I told people, they would probably say I was being too sensitive. When I was 7 months pregnant, I still took the subway every morning. My body felt heavy. I came home and still cooked and cleaned. If the kitchen wasn't perfectly clean, he would run his finger across the counter and raise his eyebrow. No yelling, no insults. Just that one look was enough to make me feel like I hadn't done enough. If dinner was 20 minutes late, he would sigh and say, "I've been working since 7 a.m. He said it so many times that I started to believe his work was the only thing that counted as tired. My back pain, my sleepless nights from leg cramps, those became small things. One night, I made shepherd's pie, lit candles to make the table feel warm. He sat down and said, "My mom makes a better crust. Did you forget the breadcrumbs?" I didn't argue. I just sat there and quietly ate my food. After Liam was born, everything became even clearer. He was happy to hold the baby when Liam was calm and clean, but the sleepless nights, the crying, the fevers, the endless laundry, those were automatically my responsibility. I took 1 year of maternity leave, like many mothers in Canada, but in his eyes, that meant I was at home all day. And if I was home, then I should be able to handle everything. The problem was not that he didn't love our son. The problem was that he believed his role ended with making money. Presence, sharing, worrying together, those invisible things didn't matter to him. Whenever I said I was tired, he told me to sleep when the baby sleeps. Whenever I said I was worried, he said I was overthinking. I told myself every marriage has hard times. I thought if I just tried a little harder, if I endured a little longer, things would balance out. But the truth is, I was slowly getting used to being overlooked. And when a woman starts getting used to that feeling, she is also slowly losing the sense that she deserves to stand as an equal in her own family. What kept me awake that night was not just my baby's 40 degrees Celsius fever. It was the calmness in Marcus's voice when he said, "You don't need me there. He believed that. Naturally. Without hesitation. And that calm certainty is what made my body go cold. It took me months to understand that our problem was never about a ski trip. It was about how a man measures his importance in his family's life. Marcus didn't think he was abandoning us. In his mind, our son was at the hospital. There were doctors. I was there. Everything was being handled. So he wasn't needed. But marriage is not just about someone handling things. Marriage is presence. It's when the person you love is shaking with fear. You don't ask, is it serious? You ask, where are you? I'm coming now. I started connecting everything. The raised eyebrow at the kitchen counter. The comparisons to his mother. The nights he went out. While I was exhausted with a teething baby. The late replies. The sighs when I said I was tired. All of it carried the same quiet message. My feelings were not a priority. And the most frightening part was this. I had learned to make myself smaller to fit that reality. I told myself, he worked hard. I told myself, men aren't expressive. I told myself, I was too sensitive. Each time, I gave up. A little more. One less expectation. One less need. One less voice. Until that night, past midnight, in the hospital room, under dim yellow lights, watching my baby sleep in a metal crib. After medication finally brought the fever down, I watched his tiny chest rise and fall. Listened to the machines beeping steadily. And I realized something very clearly. If I accept being alone in this moment, then I am teaching myself that I deserve to be alone. Marcus didn't yell. He didn't cheat. He didn't hit me. He simply wasn't there when it mattered most. And sometimes, repeated absence is more cruel than one big fight, because it makes you question yourself. It makes you ask, am I overreacting? Am I asking for too much? But an 11-month-old baby with a high fever
in the hospital is not too much. A mother who is terrified and needs her husband is not weak. That is instinct. That is the most basic thing a family should be. And in that moment, I understood. Marcus didn't change. He was just being who he had always been. A man who puts his comfort first. A man who believes financial responsibility can replace emotional presence. A man who thinks, as long as he doesn't do something terrible, everything is fine. And I had to face another truth. I helped maintain that pattern by staying silent for too long. That realization didn't make the pain go away, but it made me clear. I no longer saw that night as a bad weekend. I saw it as evidence. Something too bright to ignore. Some marriages break because of one big event. Mine broke because of many small choices repeated over time, until I could no longer convince myself they didn't matter. That night, in that cold hospital room, I wasn't just watching my child's fever. I was watching something else fade away inside me. The belief that if I just tried a little harder, he would change. And when that belief was gone, I had nothing left to hold on to, except the truth.
I still remember the moment the emergency room door opened and a familiar voice came from behind the curtain. "I'm sorry, I heard my neighbor was brought in." I looked up, my tears not even dry yet. It was Diane. I almost froze. "How did you know?" I asked. She placed her hand on my back, gentle but steady. "I saw you carrying the car seat to your car. I didn't see Marcus's car. I called you, but you didn't answer. So I followed. That was it. No overwhelming questions, no pity. She just sat down on the plastic chair next to me, like it was the most natural thing in the world. For the next 4 hours, Diane stayed right beside me. When the nurse needed me to sign papers, she held Liam for me. When the pediatrician came to explain the severe ear infection and the possibility of staying overnight, she was the one asking the right questions. How much antibiotics? What to monitor? What complications? I just nodded. My mind felt foggy. Without her, I might have missed something important. There is one moment I will never forget. Diane came back from the hospital cafe, placed a cup of hot tea and a muffin next to me. She didn't say, "You have to eat." She didn't force me. She just set it down and softly said, "You need your strength." That quiet kindness hit me hard, because that was something my husband should have done. When Liam was moved to a room for overnight monitoring, I texted Marcus. They're admitting him. Severe ear infection. We're staying overnight. 40 minutes later, he replied, "Okay, let me know in the morning. Hope he can sleep." I watched my phone screens light up and go dark again. No,
I'm coming home. No video call to see his son. Near midnight, Liam finally slept after the medication. I sat on the hard vinyl chair next to his crib, my back aching, my eyes burning. Diane had gone home to rest, but every hour, she sent a message to check on me. Her last message said, "I talked to my husband. He wants to help if needed. Get some rest. We're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere." That sentence echoed in my head for a long time. Someone who isn't family, who has no obligation, chose to stay. And someone who is my husband, my child's father, chose a snowy mountain. The next morning, when Liam's fever started to go down, I felt his tiny hand hold my finger, and I realized something. Last night, I wasn't completely alone, but the person who stayed with me was not the one who promised to stay for life. If you've ever had to be strong in a moment when you should have been allowed to be vulnerable, type 1 below. So we know there are women who have quietly made it through nights like this.
The turning point did not come from a big argument. It came quietly, almost outside of my control. A few days after Liam was discharged, I didn't tell anyone about that weekend except Diane. I didn't post anything online. I didn't vent to my friends. I just went back to my normal routine. But in my mind, I had already started recording everything. Every word, every absence, every moment I felt invisible. One evening, while Marcus sat in the living room watching TV, I filled 4 pages with everything I had been holding in. I thought it would stay a private decision, until something unexpected happened. The woman who handed me tissues in the waiting room that night turned out to run an Instagram account about motherhood and family life. She didn't know who I was, she didn't know my name, but she saw a young mother sitting alone in the ER, holding a sick baby, checking her phone again and again, quietly wiping tears. A few days later, she posted about it. No names, no accusations, just a story about what it feels like to watch a woman carry everything alone in a moment she shouldn't have been alone. The post spread. Someone Marcus knew saw it, then someone else. Eventually, it reached his workplace. I found out when Marcus walked into the kitchen, phone in his hand, his face tense. "Did you tell anyone about the hospital?" he asked. His voice wasn't angry, it was worried about his image. "I didn't post anything," I said calmly. "Someone saw, and they told what they saw." For the first time in our marriage, I saw Marcus lose control. At work, he was always confident, always certain, but this time he was quiet for a long time. And it didn't stop there. Diane's husband, Gerald, is the head lawyer at a major firm handling a merger Marcus's company was involved in. Marcus had no idea, because he had never really cared who his neighbors were. Diane told her husband about that night. I didn't ask her to, but she did. Gerald didn't publicly criticize. He didn't call to confront Marcus. He simply changed his attitude. In important meetings, his warmth disappeared. Private conversations stopped. And in the corporate world, cool distance from someone powerful can say everything. Marcus wasn't fired, but he was removed from a promotion he believed was almost guaranteed. He was no longer invited to key strategy meetings. His colleagues looked at him differently. For the first time, the consequences of one ski weekend were no longer just inside our family. They had stepped outside, reflecting him under a light he could no longer control. And while he was scrambling to manage the damage, I was quietly sitting in a lawyer's office, starting a process he never saw coming. Sitting in Priya Sandhu's office, listening, as she calmly explained each legal option, I suddenly realized something. I was no longer seeing this as a wife who was hurt or angry. I was seeing it as a mother, thinking about the kind of environment my child would grow up in. Before, I kept asking myself, am I overreacting? But when I asked a different question, if Liam treats his wife and child like this one day, would I accept it? Everything became clear, painfully clear. I don't want my son to grow up believing that making money is enough. And I don't want him to think that his mother once accepted being left behind in moments of fear. I realized this was never about one trip, one post, or one lost promotion. It was a pattern. Marcus always chose what was convenient for him first, and then found reasons to justify it. And I was always the one adjusting my feelings to fit his choices. The change in me was quiet. I stopped trying to make him understand. I stopped trying to prove I was right. I simply started acting on the truth I had finally seen. I collected hospital records, saved my telehealth call history, kept the 4 pages I had written. And when Marcus called and said I was overreacting because of one weekend, I calmly told him the call was being recorded according to the law. In that moment, I was no longer the woman crying in the emergency room. I was someone who had stopped waiting for him to change and had started changing her own life. The process was not dramatic like in the movies. There was no moment where I threw my wedding ring on the table or slammed the door and walked away. Everything was done through paperwork, through signatures, through short but clear conversations. Priya helped me organize everything. Liam's hospital records clearly showed the time, his fever condition, and the decision to keep him overnight. My Telehealth Ontario call history showed that I had already tried to seek medical advice before going to the hospital. The 4 pages I had written, dates, words, moments of absence, were not to attack him, but to show this was not a one-time incident. And the recorded call at the lawyer's office, where Marcus said I was overreacting, became the final piece, showing how he truly saw his responsibility. When Marcus received the divorce papers, he reacted exactly as I expected. First, denial, then negotiation, then blaming me for destroying the family over one weekend. But when all the evidence was placed together, he understood this was no longer about emotions. It was a complete picture. The custody agreement was settled fairly quickly. Liam would live with me as his primary home. Marcus would have visitation every other weekend and one evening during the week. Child support was calculated according to federal guidelines. No one won, no one lost. It was simply a rearrangement of reality based on what had happened. The most important thing I learned was this: when you stop arguing with emotions and start preparing with clarity, everything changes. Write things down. Keep records. Seek professional advice. Take steps one by one. Not loud, but firm. When everything came to an end, there was no applause. Marcus didn't lose everything, but he lost something he once thought was guaranteed: the image of a man who had everything under control. He stayed at his company, but his chances for promotion were no longer the same. Important meetings became fewer. The confidence that once made him stand out now carried a visible crack. As for me, I didn't win. I simply returned to where I was meant to be: a mother protecting her child, a woman who no longer accepts being overlooked. I went back to part-time work at my old design company. My former colleagues welcomed me back with warm hugs. In the mornings, I take Liam to daycare. In the afternoons, I pick him up. At night, we eat simple dinners in a small kitchen that feels peaceful. The cycle ended that night in the hospital. He chose to leave. I chose to stay. And that choice reshaped both of our lives. Liam is almost 2 years old now. He's healthy, always smiling, and has a very serious love for garbage trucks. Every time he hears the engine outside, he runs to the window and waves. Some evenings, I sit and watch him playing on the floor, the warm light falling softly on his hair. And I think about that night in the hospital, the night I sat alone on that hard chair, watching his tiny chest rise and fall, and realized I could not keep living in a marriage where my fear was treated like an inconvenience. I don't regret leaving. I only regret how long it took me to trust what I already saw. If you are in a relationship where you always have to tell yourself, Maybe I'm overthinking. Pause for a moment. Your feelings don't come from nowhere. If you have ever been left alone in a moment but should have been shared, type 1 below. Not to complain, but to remind yourself that you deserve someone who stays.